She traded the very essence of her soul to a witch to save her dying brother. Now, wolfless and hollow, she is a silent ghost among her own kind, a shifter who cannot shift. But when the Alpha King's mate bond suddenly connects to a woman with no wolf, his fury isn't directed at her. It's a lethal promise of vengeance against the one who dared to steal what belongs to them both. Her name is Ilara, and in the world of shifters, to be without your animal is to be less than nothing, a silent, walking void where a vibrant spirit once lived. Cast out by her pack, she survives on the fringes, believing the cruel exchange was final. But the mate bond is a force of primordial magic, and it has now begun to scream into the emptiness where her wolf should be. It is a call that will summon a king and ignite a hunt for the stolen spirit that could shatter the ancient rules of their world forever. Her brother Kaelan was her only family. Their parents had been lost to a border skirmish years before, leaving the two young wolves to cling to each other in the sprawling, ancient territory of the Ironwood Pack. Ilara was a quiet Omega, her wolf spirit a gentle, silver-furred presence content to run at the edges of the pack's consciousness. Kaelan was a fierce, promising beta, his spirit a storm-grey hunter. They had nothing but each other, and that was enough. Until it was. It began with a fever that no modern medicine could touch, a wasting sickness that attacked the soul of a shifter, not the body. The pack healers called it the spirit rot, a rare magical blight that unraveled the bond between wolf and human. They watched helpless as Kaelan's vibrant grey wolf began to fade within him. His eyes lost their amber glow, his senses dulled. Within weeks he was bedridden, his human form sweating and trembling, his animal spirit so faint Ilara could barely sense it. The Alpha declared the case hopeless. The pack's resources would be spent on the strong, not the dying. This is where desperation makes its home, in the hollow silence of watching your last light flicker out. Whispers on the wind spoke of the Mosswife, a witch who dwelled in the boglands at the territory's edge. She dealt in essences and exchanges, it was said. Her price was always a piece of your soul. One rain-swept night, with Kaelan's breath growing shallow, Ilara slipped past the sentries. The journey to the crossroad bog was a blur of mud and terror. The Mosswife was not a story. She was a hunched figure wrapped in living peat and shadow, her eyes like chips of wet flint. The boy's wolf is almost gone, the witch croaked, not needing to be told. The thread is nearly severed. I can stitch it back, anchor it to his human half once more. Anything, Ilara breathed, the rain mixing with the tears on her face. Name your price. The witch's gaze settled on her, and Ilara felt a cold, invasive probe at the core of her being, a touch on her own silver wolf. The sickness feeds on shifter spirit. To reweave one, I need the raw material of another. A full, healthy bond, yours. The meaning crashed into Ilara, not just her wolf, the very connection to it, her identity. You want to take it. A trade, the witch corrected, a sly note in her voice. Your wolf's spirit for his life, your essence for his, you will be hollow but he will be whole, a fair bargain. There was no time, no other option. The image of Kaelan's smile, of running together under a full moon, drowned out every scream of instinct. Do it. The ritual was not fire and chanting. It was a silent, violent suction. Ilara stood in the circle of black stones as the witch's cold magic slithered into her chest. It found the warm, wild, loving presence of her silver wolf and pulled. It was an unraveling, a severing so profound it felt less like pain and more like being erased. She felt a final, mournful howl echo in the vault of her soul, and then silence. A deafening, absolute silence, where a heartbeat of wildness had lived since her first breath. She collapsed. When she awoke, dawn was bleeding into the sky, the witch was gone, and Kaelan was standing over her, his color restored, his eyes clear and brimming with confused concern. Ilara, what are you doing out here? I feel amazing. My wolf is back. He helped her up. She tried to speak, to feel joy, but the world was muted. The rich tapestry of scent, pine, damp earth, prey was gone. The subliminal hum of the pack mind, a constant background noise, had vanished. She was locked in the silent, sensory prison of her own human skull. She was empty. She told him a lie, that she'd found a rare herb, that the fever had broken naturally. But packs know. An Omega's wolf is a soft note in the chorus, but its absence is a glaring silence. Within days, the Alpha and his betas confronted her. They could smell the void on her, the sterile scent of a human where a shifter should be. They could sense no animal within. Abomination, the Alpha snarled. A shifter without a spirit is a danger, a weakness. You are cast out, never return. Kalan, restored and vibrant, protested, but his loyalty was now divided. The pack was his life. His sister was now a ghost who made his wolf bristle with unease. He watched, heartbroken, as she was exiled with nothing but the clothes on her back. For a year, Ilara wandered. She found work in a human town at the edge of the territories, a diner waitress who flinched at sudden noises because she could no longer hear them coming. She lived in a perpetual state of sensory deprivation, a phantom limb pain for a soul she had sold. She was a ghost among shifters, ignored or pitied, a living cautionary tale. The bargain had saved a life, but it had killed her asterisk. Then, on a night with no moon, the silence broke. Started as a pressure deep in the hollowed-out cavern of her chest, a strange, foreign warmth. Then it exploded into a feeling so vast, so loud it was agony. It wasn't sound, it was a presence, a blazing, dominant, furious consciousness slamming into the void where her wolf should be, trying to fill it, demanding a connection. It was a bond, a mate bond, but with nothing on her end to catch it. It screamed into the emptiness, a king's call meeting a subjectless throne. She doubled over in the alley behind the diner, gasping. Images, sensations not her own flooded her, mountains of sharp stone, the smell of snow and old power, a rage as deep as the earth. And beneath the rage, a desperate, searching pull. It was looking for her asterisk. It had found her address, but her house was gone. Hundreds of miles away, in a fortress of glass and steel high in the Rocky Mountains, Alpha King Ronan Blacksteel jerked awake from a dead sleep. A golden bolt of pure, possessive certainty had just arced through him, the ancient magic of the mate bond activating with the force of a tectonic shift. It pointed him east. It sang of his other half. But as he reached for it, as his own mighty wolf spirit lunged toward the connection, he met nothing. A chilling, impossible vacuum. A bond with only one end. His roar of confusion shook the windows of his penthouse. It wasn't that his mate was rejecting him. It was that his mate, according to the bond's primal scream, had no wolf to answer with. The bond was trying to connect to a phantom. Rage, cold and lethal, immediately swamped the confusion. This wasn't natural. This was a violation. Someone had broken his mate. Someone had taken what was his. And Ronan Blacksteel, the king who had united 7 territories by blood and will, made a new vow. He would find the woman tied to the silence. And then he would find the thing that had created it, and he would tear it apart with his bare hands. He came not with an army, but with a silence deeper than her own. 3 days after the bond screamed into her void, the small human town went quiet. Not the quiet of night, but the quiet of a forest when a predator enters the clearing. Birds stopped singing. Dogs whined and hid under porches. The few shifters who lived there under assumed identities suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. Ilara felt it first as a headache, a pressure building behind her eyes. Then, as she refilled a customer's coffee, the bell over the diner door didn't just chime. It shattered, the glass pellets scattering across the linoleum. He filled the doorway, Ronan Blacksteel. He was taller than any man had a right to be, and broad, dressed in simple, dark clothes that did nothing to hide the lethal grace beneath. His hair was the color of charcoal, his beard closely trimmed, but it was his eyes that froze the room. They were molten, burning gold, scanning the diner with an intensity that felt like a physical searchlight. They passed over the terrified cook, the frozen trucker at the counter, and landed on her. Ilara dropped the coffee pot. It hit the floor with a crash, spraying brown liquid across her shoes. The bond, that one-sided screaming warmth, exploded into a supernova. It didn't fill the void, it wrapped around it, a cage of furious, protective energy. She couldn't breathe. Ronan crossed the diner in 4 strides. The air parted for him. He stopped a foot away, his gaze raking over her face, her hands, as if memorizing her, as if verifying a treasure he'd been promised. Up close, the power rolling off him was a physical heat. He inhaled deeply, and his expression, which had been carved from stone, fractured. He smelled it. Beneath the scent of cheap soap and fried food was her natural scent, a hint of night-blooming jasmine and rain, now faded. And beneath that, the sterile, chilling odor of absence. the sour, cold signature of a severed spirit. His mate's unique fragrance was stranded, with no animal soul to give it depth and warmth. His golden eyes flashed, the pupils slitting vertically for a heartbeat. A low, dangerous rumble started in his chest, a sound that made the remaining dishes in the rack vibrate. Who? The single word was guttural, dripping with a promise of violence. Ilara could only shake her head, her voice stolen by terror and the overwhelming press of his presence. This wasn't the gentle, fated connection of stories. This was a tsunami meeting a dry lakebed. Alpha King, the voice came from the door. A man nearly as large as Ronan stood there, his head respectfully bowed but his posture alert. This was Kale, Ronan's beater and shadow. The local pack, Ironwood, their alpha is outside. He wishes to explain. Ronan's hand, which had been hovering near Ilara's cheek, as if afraid she'd vanish, curled into a fist. The protective fury around her tightened. "Stay," he commanded her, the word leaving no room for argument. He turned, and the focus of that terrifying energy shifted to the diner's parking lot. Alpha Goran of the Ironwood pack stood surrounded by a half-circle of his beaters. He was a large man, but he looked diminished, sweating under the king's gaze. He bowed deeply. "My king, we had no idea she was spoken for. We detected the aberration a year ago, a wolfless one. It's an abomination, a weakness. Our laws are clear. We cast her out to protect the territory." Ronan didn't speak. He simply walked until he was toe-to-toe with Goran. The pressure in the air spiked, forcing Goran's beaters to their knees with grunts of pain. "Your laws," Ronan said, his voice quiet and deadly, "are for the protection of the pack. You looked at a wounded member and saw a stain to be removed. You did not ask why. You did not seek the cause." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried like a gunshot. "You threw my diamond into the mud because it was dirty." Goran paled. "My king, Silence. Ronan's gaze swept over the kneeling beaters, then back to the diner, where Ilara stood silhouetted in the broken doorway. "She is Ilara, and as of this moment, she is queen of the Northern Territories. Your authority over her and over this border town is forfeit. Ironwood is now a vassal pack. You will answer to my beater, Kale, from this day forward. Dispute this, and I will dissolve your bloodline." It was a decree of absolute power. Goran sagged, the fight draining out of him. He had come to justify an exile and had lost his pack's sovereignty in 60 seconds. Ronan turned his back on them, his entire world narrowing once more to the woman in the doorway. He approached her again, the fury bleeding from his posture, replaced by a focus so intense it was unnerving. "You are coming with me." It wasn't a question. Ilara found her voice, a thin, reedy thing. "My brother Kaelan, he's in Ironwood. He doesn't know about the price." Ronan's eyes narrowed. "Price." He tasted the word. "You will tell me everything, but not here." He gestured, and a sleek, black vehicle glided to the curb. Kale opened the rear door. Ilara's life, the fragile routine of survival she'd built, evaporated in an instant. She was ushered into the car, Ronan a solid, radiating presence beside her. As they pulled away, she saw her diner apron lying in a puddle of coffee on the floor, a lifetime ago. The journey to his mountain fortress, Obsidian Peak, was a blur. He didn't press her. He just watched her, his gaze a tangible weight, the bond a constant, confusing hum in her hollow core. He was trying to feed energy into it, she realized, to fill the void from his side, but it was like pouring water into a bottomless well. At Obsidian Peak, Ilara was met not with suspicion, but with a bewildered, solemn reverence. The pack felt their king's bond. They sensed its power and its profound wrongness. They saw a queen whose throne was an emptiness. The Den Mother, a sharp-eyed woman named Anya, took her in hand, clucking over her thin frame and worn clothes with a practicality that brooked no argument. It was in the quiet of a luxurious suite overlooking the jagged mountains that Ronan finally asked. He sat across from her, his power deliberately banked. "Tell me of the price, Ilara." And so she did. The words spilled out, Kaelan's sickness, the hopelessness, the desperate trek to the crossroad bog, the mosswife, the deal, the unraveling, the silence. She described the feeling of her wolf being pulled out by the roots. When she finished, she was trembling, but no tears came. It was as if that part of her had been sold too. Ronan listened, a statue of contained violence. When she spoke the witch's name, the mosswife, a muscle in his jaw ticked. A spirit forger, he murmured, his voice dark. They are forbidden. Their magic is a cancer. They don't just trade, they collect. They hoard the essences they take, weaving them into abominations or consuming them for power. He stood packing like a caged tiger. The sickness your brother had, spirit rot. It is not natural. It is a witch's tool, a carefully crafted poison that weakens the bond, making it easier to sever. She created a problem and offered the solution. Your brother was never the target, Ilara. He stopped, his golden eyes burning into hers. You were. A healthy, loving Omega Wolf spirit is a rare and potent thing. She wanted yours. She engineered a scenario where you would give it freely. The world tilted. Ilara's breath caught. All this time, she had carried the weight of a tragic, noble sacrifice. Now it was recast as the calculated victimization of a predator. Her guilt and grief twisted into something new, something sharp and hot, a raw, burning anger. She has my wolf, Ilara's voice was a whisper. She has its spirit, contained, perhaps dormant. Ronan crouched before her, his hands on the arms of her chair. The mate bond should be impossible for you. It requires two spirits to resonate. But it did form. It reached *U*, not your wolf. That means the spirit is not destroyed, it exists. And a bond this powerful, a fierce, terrifying hope ignited in his eyes. It might be a key, a link back to what was taken. A wild, impossible longing surged in Ilara's chest, to not be empty, to be whole, to answer the king's call with a howl of her own. Can we get it back? Ronan's smile was all sharp edges and promise. We are not asking, we are taking. He stood, pulling her to her feet. But we are not hunting a simple rogue. We are hunting a spirit forger on her own ground. The bog is a locus of her power. She will have defenses, traps. She may have already twisted your wolf's spirit into something else. He looked at her, his gaze assessing. The bond gives me strength, but in that place, my rage will be a liability. She will use it. Your silence, your emptiness, it might be our advantage. She cannot manipulate a wolf that isn't there. You must be the anchor. You must be the one who walks us in. Ilara, who had been passive for a year, a leaf blown by the wind of others' decisions, felt a spark ignite in the void. A purpose, not to be saved, but to fight, to reclaim. She met his burning eyes and nodded. Tell me what to do. The preparation was a crash course in a war she never knew existed. Kale, the beater, laid out maps of the boglands, showing energy Li lines and zones of corrupted magic. Anya taught her to brew simple wards against spiritual possession, her hands steady as she guided Ilara. Ronan drilled her on one thing, the anchor point. The bond is a tether, he said, his forehead pressed to hers in a stunningly intimate gesture meant to strengthen the connection. When the fog of her magic closes in, when you cannot see or hear me, feel for the heat, feel for the pull. It will lead you back to me, and you will lead me to her heart. 3 days later, they stood at the edge of the mosswife's domain. The ironwood border had never seemed so sinister. The healthy evergreen forest gave way to stunted, twisted trees, their bark slick with unnatural fungus. The air grew thick and silent, the normal sounds of life smothered by a blanket of damp. The ground became spongy peat, sucking at their boots. Ronan was a coil of tense power beside her, his eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. His wolf was at the surface, agitated by the corrupted energy. Ilara felt nothing but the cold damp and the strange, steady warmth in her chest where the one-sided bond lived. Her void was, as Ronan predicted, a strange shield. The bog's oppressive magic slithered over her but found no purchase, no inner animal to frighten or corrupt. They moved deeper, wisps of mist, glowing a sickly green, curled around their legs. Shadows moved independently of the wind. Ilara focused on the heat in her chest, a lighthouse in the sensory void. Ronan's breathing grew heavier behind her, a low growl constantly rumbling in his throat. The magic was working on him, feeding on his protective fury, trying to turn it into blind rage. Ilara, his voice was strained. The path, it's shifting, the trees are moving. She looked, the path ahead seemed clear to her, but she trusted him. She closed her eyes, ignoring the terrifying landscape, and focused solely on the bond. The warm pull wasn't ahead, it tugged slightly to the left. This way, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. She led, and he followed, his large hand gripping her shoulder, a physical point of contact to ground him. They found the first trap not by sight, but by consequence. A shimmer, almost invisible, lay across a patch of harmless-looking moss. Ilara, sensing a wrongness in the air's texture through her bondanka, stopped. Ronan, his eyes clouded with green-tinged fury, stepped past her. His boot touched the moss, and the shimmer exploded. Not in fire, but in sound, a psychic shriek composed of 100 captured animal whimpers and howls. The collective agony of stolen spirits. Ronan roared, clutching his head, his wolf momentarily deafened and blinded by the spiritual assault. Ilara, in her silence, heard only a faint, high-pitched ring. She acted on instinct, lunging forward and pulling him backward by his jacket out of the trap's radius. He collapsed to his knees, panting, the gold in his eyes wild. The sounds they were. They weren't real, she said, kneeling before him, her hands on his face. She forced him to look at her. Feel the bond, just the bond, the heat, the pull, that's real. She was repeating his lessons back to him, the student steadying the master. Slowly, the wildness receded from his gaze, replaced by a stunned, profound respect. He nodded, his breathing easing. "You are my true anchor," he breathed. They pressed on, deeper into the heart of the bog. The mist thickened into a fog that swallowed light. Ilara could barely see her own hands. Ronan was a solid, warm presence at her back, but visually he was gone. The bond was now their only compass. And then the pull changed. It didn't just lead forward. A second thread, faint and cold and heartbreakingly familiar, tugged from a different direction, a silver whimper in the dark. It was a ghost of a feeling, a memory of a sensation, but it was hers asterisk. "Ronan," she whispered, her heart hammering. "I feel it, I feel her, she's close, she's scared." From the depths of the green fog ahead, a new voice slithered, ancient and amused and dripping with malice. It was the voice from the worst night of her life. "Little sacrifice returns, and she brings a mighty candle into my darkness. How thoughtful! I have so missed the warmth of your wolf child, but the king's fire that will burn so much longer." The green fog before them coalesced, twisting into the shape of the mosswife, but she was no longer a hunched figure in rags. She stood tall, her form woven from living moss, snarled roots, and the shimmering, trapped light of countless stolen spirits. Dozens of faint, glowing wisps, blue, green, silver, gold, swirled around her like a nebula of agony. Among them, pulsing with a familiar, mournful light, was a silver thread, Ilara's wolf. Ronan snarled, the sound tearing through the bog. His control was fraying, the protective fury the bond fed him turning into a blinding rage in the face of the thief. "Release it," he commanded, his voice shaking the ground. The mosswife's laugh was the sound of cracking ice. "Release? I do not release, King of Stone and Sky. I absorb, I refine. This one," she gestured to the silver wisp, which let out a silent cry Ilara felt in her bones, "is particularly pure, an Omega's unconditional love given freely. It has been the perfect catalyst, but you," her root-like fingers reached toward Ronan. "Your spirit is a wildfire, a conqueror's essence. With yours added to my collection, the fusion will be complete. I will not just be a forger, I will be a goddess of this swamp and then this world." Ilara's mind raced. Catalyst asterisk. Ronan's earlier words echoed. She engineered a scenario where you would give it freely. Her sacrifice wasn't just stolen, it was being used as a tool to take more, to take asterisk him. "You poisoned my brother," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. It wasn't a question. "A gentle nudge," the witch conceded. "A seed of rot in a promising young beater. I knew the pack would fail him. I knew you would seek answers. You Omegas are so beautifully predictable in your love. You walked right into my parlor and handed me the key." The betrayal was so vast, it was almost peaceful. Every moment of grief, every second of hollow silence, had been a manipulated step in this creature's plan. The anger in Ilara's chest hardened into something cold and diamond-sharp. Ronan took a step forward, his body beginning to shimmer with the telltale light of an impending shift. "You will touch nothing else." "Ah, but the touch has already happened," the witch crooned. She closed her fist, and the swirling constellation of spirits shrieked. The silver wisp, Ilara's wolf, shot toward Ronan, not to attack, but to wrap around him. As it touched the aura of his power, it didn't clash, it amplified. The bond in Ilara's chest went from a warm pull to a searing, white-hot cable. Ronan roared, not in anger, but in shock and pain. His forced shift halted. The witch wasn't attacking his body. She was attacking his spirit through the catalyst of Ilara's stolen wolf, using its inherent, loving connection to Omega energy to violently overcharge the mate bond. It was spiritual feedback loop, and Ronan was the conduit. He fell to one knee, veins glowing gold under his skin, his eyes wide with agony. He was being burned from the inside out by his own power, magnified. "Stop!" Ilara screamed, rushing toward him, but an invisible wall of thickened air and thorns slammed up from the peat, separating them. "You wanted your wolf back, child," the mosswife whispered. "Take it, feel what you sold." She snapped her fingers. The silver wisp disengaged from Ronan and shot across the clearing, slamming into Ilara's chest. The world exploded. Sound, scent, feeling, a tsunami of sensory input she hadn't felt in a year crashed over her. The damp rot of the bog was a symphony of decay and life. The electric ozone of Ronan's pain was a sharp tang. The howling chorus of trapped spirits was a deafening dirge. And within her, a wild, terrified, ecstatic presence, her silver wolf, suddenly back in the cage of her soul, but thrashing, confused, and half-mad from its captivity. Ilara gasped, visions swimming. She could feel again, but it was too much, too loud after the long silence. Her knees buckled. Her wolf wasn't integrating. It was a panicked animal trapped in a space that had become a prison. "It does not recognize its home, you see," the witch observed clinically. "The space has atrophied. The bond you share with the king is now a chaos of amplified power and feral panic. You cannot control it. He cannot withstand it. This is the true price of your bargain. You can never truly reclaim what was lost. You can only watch as it destroys what you have gained." This was the wait, it gets worse moment. Getting the spirit back wasn't salvation, it was a weaponization of her loss. The witch had planned for this, too. She hadn't just stolen a wolf, she had poisoned the very possibility of its return. Ronan was still on his knees, breathing in ragged gasps, the overloaded bond visibly coursing through him like golden lightning. His eyes met Ilara, and in them she saw not just pain, but a desperate apology. He couldn't shield her from this. Ilara clutched her chest, the chaos within tearing her apart. Her wolf's panic was a mirror of her own. They were both lost. The anchor point, the simple warmth of the bond, was gone, replaced by this screaming feedback loop. The mosswife began to advance, her form drawing energy from the surrounding bog, growing larger. "The king's spirit will be the cornerstone of my new form. Yours, little catalyst, will be the mortar. You will both live on, in a way, as part of something greater." Despair threatened to swallow Ilara whole, but deep within the chaotic storm of her reawakened senses, a memory surfaced, not of sound or scent, but of asterisk feeling, the long, quiet year, the void, the profound, aching silence she had learned to navigate. Her wolf was panicking because everything was too loud, because it was trying to be what it once was, in a world that had moved on. What if she didn't try to go back? What if the anchor wasn't the old bond, or the wild presence of her wolf, but the asterisk silence she herself had mastered? It was an insane gamble, to reject the returned spirit, even temporarily, to willingly re-enter the void to find clarity. As the mosswife reached a clawed hand toward the incapacitated Ronan, Ilara made her choice. She didn't fight the chaos within. She did the opposite. She closed her eyes, and with a will forged in a year of hollow endurance, she pushed. Not the wolf out, but the sensory noise, the overwhelming input. She imagined building the walls of her quiet prison again, not to shut her wolf out, but to create a soundproof room within her soul. She muffled the shrieking bog, the crying spirits, the electric scream of the bond. She focused on the one thing that had been constant, the unique, quiet essence of Ronan beneath the storm of his power, not the king's fire, but the man's steady, relentless core. The chaos dampened. The wolf's panic, isolated now in a pocket of silence, began to quiet, confused. The bond feedback lessened from a scream to a hum. Ilara opened her eyes. The world was still vivid, but manageable. Her wolf was a presence again, not a tornado. The mosswife froze, her extended hand inches from Ronan's head. "What are you doing?" Ilara stood up. "You miscalculated," she said, her voice calm in the eerie way of the eye of a storm. "You thought my strength was my wolf. My strength was surviving without it. She took a step toward the thorny wall. You think his strength is his power, his strength is his will. She looked at Ronan, who was watching her, his breathing easing as the overload receded. And our strength, she finished, placing her hands on the living thorns, ignoring the bite, is that we're not a king and a wolf. We're an anchor and a hammer, and you're standing between us. With a final, focused thought, she didn't break the wall. She quieted it. The magic sustaining the thorns was a shrill, discordant note. She imposed silence. The wall didn't shatter, it withered, crumbling into dry, dead vines. The moss wife recoiled, confusion on her woven face. This was outside her calculus of spirit and power. Ronan saw his opening. The moment the bond's pain subsided, he moved, not with a shift, but with pure, focused velocity. He lunged, not at the witch's central form, but at the swirling nebula of spirits around her. His hands, glowing with contained power, plunged into the swirling lights. "You want essence," he roared. "Take it." He didn't attack. He did something far more dangerous. He opened his own formidable spiritual presence, and Asterisk pulled Asterisk, not to consume, but to attract Asterisk. He became a magnetic pole for the stolen spirits, offering a path to warmth and shelter away from their cold prison. The captured wisps hesitated, then a brave blue, a hopeful green, streaked away from the witch and into Ronan's aura. He didn't absorb them, he shielded them, a protector king even in a spiritual war. The mosswife screamed, a real sound of rage and loss. Her power diminished as each spirit fled. Her form of moss and roots began to crack and dry. "No, they are mine, my tapestry." Ilara acted. Her connection to her own silver spirit was now a clear, quiet thread. She reached for it not with force, but with recognition. A gentle call, "Come home, it's quiet now." The silver wisp disentangled from the chaotic mass and flew to her, not slamming, but settling, melting back into the space that had been made ready for it. The reunion was not a violent explosion, but a deep, resonant chime that vibrated through every cell. Her senses expanded, but this time they were asterisk to control. The world was bright, loud, and beautiful, and she was no longer afraid of it. The mosswife, weakened and destabilized, made a final, desperate move. She abandoned her constructed form, collapsing into a single, concentrated bolt of malignant green energy. She shot not at Ronan, but at the heart of the bog, the ancient, corrupted stone altar at the clearing's center, the true source of her power. "If I cannot ascend," her voice echoed from the stone, "I will unravel. The release of every spirit I've consumed will vaporize this territory and every soul in it." The altar began to pulse like a sick heart. Cracks of violent green light spiderwebbed across its surface. The remaining trapped spirits wailed. This was the ultimate escalation, a dead man's switch. She would trigger a spiritual meltdown. Ronan and Ilara stood amid the clearing, the restored bond between them thrumming with unified purpose for the first time. They had reclaimed what was stolen. They had broken the witch's plan. But now they faced not a thief, but a suicidal bomb. The king and his queen, finally whole, looked at the pulsing core of corruption. The true test was no longer taking back what was theirs. It was containing a catastrophe that threatened to destroy everything. In that frozen second, facing annihilation, the answer wasn't in a grand display of power, but in the quiet truth they had just proven. The mosswife's magic was a chorus of stolen voices, a symphony of control. To contain its unraveling, they needed the opposite, a single, unified note of perfect silence. Ilara's mind, now seamlessly connected to her silver wolf, moved with a new, instinctive clarity. She understood the corrupted altar. It wasn't just a power source, it was a prison, and the witch had just shattered the lock from the inside. The spirits weren't being released, they were being violently detonated. "Ronan," she shouted over the growing psychic wind. "The stone, it's a vessel, we have to contain the blast within it." He understood instantly. To try and absorb or deflect that much chaotic spiritual energy would destroy them. But to reinforce the prison itself, to temporarily seal the cracks, it was a stopgap, but it was the only move. "I will hold the structure," he growled, his hands already radiating a fierce, golden light as he directed his power toward the pulsing altar. The cracks slowed their spread, the light dimming slightly under the strain of his will, but it was like holding a shattered dam together with bare hands. The spirits, Ilara, you must calm them, you must make them still asterisk. He was asking the impossible, dozens of panicking, tormented animal spirits on the brink of explosive release. But Ilara knew stillness. She had lived in it for a year. She approached the raging altar, not with force, but with a profound, reaching quiet. She didn't speak, she didn't command. She remembered asterisk. She remembered the silence of her empty chest, the hollow piece of sensory deprivation. She remembered the anchor point she had built within it. She took that memory, that skill forged in desolation, and she poured it out through her renewed bond, not as a barrier, but as an invitation. She projected a blanket of quiet over the screaming altar, not to suppress, but to soothe. It was the spiritual equivalent of a soundproof room. The chaotic psychic shrieks muted. The frantic vibrations of the trapped spirits began to slow, confused by the sudden, enveloping calm. One by one, the glowing wisps still trapped within the stones ceased their frantic struggling. They grew still, not extinguished, but resting. The violent pulse of green light became a slow, steady thrum. Ronan, his muscles corded with the effort, forced his reinforcing energy into the cracks, sealing them with ribbons of solid gold light. The altar stopped cracking. For a long, tense minute, they held it, a perfect balance of fierce containment and gentle quiet. Then, the last of the malignant green light within the stone flickered and died. The Mosswife's conscious presence was gone, unraveled in her own failed detonation. What remained was inert stone, and within it, dozens of dormant, peaceful spirits. Ronan released his power, staggering back a step. Ilara let the projected quiet dissipate, the natural sounds of the bog, the drip of water, the distant croak of a frog, rushing back in. They stood amid the clearing, breathing heavily, the immediate threat past. The real work was just beginning. They could not leave the spirits trapped, nor could they simply release them. A spirit separated from its living host for too long would fade into nothingness. They needed a conduit, a way to guide each essence back to its source or to a peaceful rest. Ilara looked at her hands, then at Ronan. "The bond," she said, an idea forming. "It's a bridge. It reached me when I was empty. Could we use it as a path to send them home?" Ronan considered, examining the dormant stone. A directed pulse, a beacon, but to do that, we would have to temporarily open our bond to them, to let them sense the connection to a living, anchored pair. It is intimate and dangerous. Their pain could flood us. "They've been in pain long enough," Ilara replied, her voice firm. She placed a hand on the now cool stone. Her silver wolf within her whined softly, not in fear, but in empathy. Together they sat before the altar. Ronan took her hands in his, their foreheads touching. They opened the mate bond, not just to each other, but outward, shaping it into a beacon of safe passage. It was like turning their linked souls into a lighthouse in a spiritual storm. Ilara focused on the quiet, stable core of herself, a calm harbor. Ronan focused on the strong, guiding signal, a path through the dark. Then, gently, they began to draw the dormant spirits from the stone, one by one. The first was a deep blue wisp, the spirit of a water-lined wolf. As it touched their open bond, they were flooded with its final memories, a lakeside pack, a playful chase, then the creeping cold of the Mosswife's magic. The grief was sharp, but Ilara's quiet absorbed the shock, and Ronan's will provided direction. They poured their intention into the beacon, "Go home, find your lake." The blue spirit brightened, pulsed with recognition, and then shot upward, vanishing into the twilight sky, heading northeast. They repeated the process. A green spirit of a forest hunter found its path to a distant pinewood. A golden spirit of a plains runner streaked toward the south. Each release was a draining effort, an emotional toll as they briefly lived each spirit's loss and longing, but each successful departure strengthened their own bond, weaving their wills tighter together. The last spirit was not a wolf. It was a pale, shimmering wisp that felt of feathers and high cliffs, a hawk shifter. It had been trapped the longest. Its memories were faint, almost gone. It didn't have a home to return to. As it hovered before them, confused, Ilara felt a pang of profound sorrow. To guide it to nothingness felt like a second death. Ronan's thought brushed against hers through the bond. Obsidian Peak has high cliffs. It remembers the air. Together they reshaped the beacon's call, not go home, but come home. The pale spirit circled them once, then gently descended, not shooting away, but settling into the very stone of the clearing, merging with the latent magic of the place itself. It would be a guardian spirit for the now purified bog. The work took hours. When it was done, the altar was just a moss-covered stone. The oppressive weight of the bog was gone. The air, while still damp, smelled of clean earth and growing things. Exhaustion clung to them, but it was a clean, satisfied weariness. They returned to Obsidian Peak as different people. The pack felt it immediately. Before, Ilara had been a silent queen, a mystery wrapped in their king's protection. Now she walked with her own aura, a potent, quiet strength that complemented Ronan's blazing power perfectly. Her silver wolf, once reclaimed, now shone within her, calm and deeply bonded, not just to her, but to the king's spirit as well. The first order of business was Ironwood. Ronan and Ilara returned not as conquerors, but as arbiters. Alpha Goran was stripped of his title, but not exiled. He was demoted to a simple guardian, a penance for his failure of compassion. Kaylan, Ilara's brother, was summoned. Their reunion was bittersweet. Kaylan was overjoyed to see her alive, radiant, and whole, but when she explained the truth, that his sickness had been a witch's ploy to target her asterisk, his joy turned to ash, followed by a guilt so profound it shook him. He had been the unwitting weapon used to break his sister. "I should have known," he whispered, unable to meet her eyes. Ilara took his face in her hands. "You were the victim, Kaylan. The love was real. The sacrifice was my choice. The manipulation was hers. Don't let her poison what's left." Ronan, watching, made a decree. Kaylan would not inherit Ironwood. Instead, he would come to Obsidian Peak. He would train under Kael, the beater, to learn true leadership, not of arrogance, but of service and protection. It was a chance at redemption, and Kaylan, humbled and determined, took it. Months passed. The purified boglands, now under the protection of the settled hawk spirit, began to heal. Rare herbs started to grow there, and Ronan's pack carefully harvested them, using the site not as a place of fear, but of renewal. Ilara's role evolved. She was not just a queen by bond, she became the pack's heart. She had a preternatural ability to sense discord, to soothe frayed tempers, to find the quiet solution. She worked with Anya to reorganize the pack's social structure, ensuring omegas and betas had clear paths to contribution and respect. Ronan handled territory and external threats. She fortified their home from within. Their bond deepened into a seamless partnership. They could communicate with a look, a touch. At night, they would run under the moon, a massive shadow-black wolf and a sleek silver mate, their howls a perfect harmony that echoed through the mountains. But the past always leaves a shadow. One evening, while reviewing territorial reports, Ronan received a message. A scout from the now purified bog had found something. Embedded in the base of the old altar stone, where the Mosswife's essence had unraveled, was a small, perfectly formed obsidian shard. It was cold to the touch and hummed with a faint, residual echo of the witch's magic, not alive, but preserving a sliver of her knowledge. This was the final, surprising detail. It was a forbidden archive, containing fragments of the Spirit Forger's arts, not to be used, but to be studied, to understand the enemy so they could never be blindsided again. Ronan wanted to destroy it. Ilara, after a long silence, argued to keep it under the most severe lock and key. "We protect the pack by understanding the dark, not by pretending it doesn't exist," she said. "We guard it, we never use it, but we learn from it." He relented, seeing the wisdom in her quiet steel. The shard was sealed in a lead-lined vault deep beneath Obsidian Peak, a dark footnote to their story, a reminder of the price of power and the necessity of vigilance. A year after the bargain was broken, Ilara stood on the same balcony where she had first surveyed her new kingdom. The snow was melting, and the first signs of spring touched the air. Ronan's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "You're thinking of the silence," he murmured, sensing her mood. "I'm thinking it was never an emptiness," she said, leaning back into him. "It was a forge. It shaped the tool I needed to reclaim myself, to help you, to save those spirits." He turned her in his arms, his amber eyes soft. "You are the strongest creature I have ever known, not despite the silence, but because of it." Below them, the pack compound thrived. Kaylan laughed with some young warriors, finally at peace. Anya directed the planting of the spring gardens. The territory was secure, their bond unshakable. The dark bargain had cost Ilara everything. It had made her a ghost. But from that hollowed-out space, she had rebuilt herself not as the Omega she was, but as the queen she was meant to be. And the Alpha King, whose fury had once promised vengeance, now held her with a tenderness that was far more powerful. They had faced the thief, reclaimed what was stolen, and contained the catastrophe. The story that began with a loss ended with a kingdom forged in quiet strength and fierce devotion. The ghost had become the cornerstone. So what does this story of stolen spirits and a king's fury truly reveal? On the surface, it's a classic fantasy of love and revenge. But beneath the magic lies a raw truth about identity, sacrifice, and the unseen strength born in emptiness. Ilara's journey mirrors a profound psychological reality. Studies show that the most severe trauma often involves a loss of self, a feeling that a core part of you has died. For a year, Ilara lived that reality. She was a ghost, not just to her pack, but to herself. The Mosswife didn't just steal her wolf, she stole the lens through which Ilara experienced the world. Yet it was in that hollowed-out silence that she forged her real power. She learned to navigate a world stripped of instinct, to find stability where there was none. This aligns with clinical understanding. Recovery isn't about going back to who you were before the loss. It's about a transformative integration, where the wound becomes part of a new, more resilient whole. Ilara didn't get her old wolf back. She integrated a reclaimed spirit with the formidable person she became in its absence. Ronan's initial rage, while possessive, highlights another uncomfortable truth from relationship psychology. The intense, protective drive of a fated mate often romanticizes what in human terms would be red flags: control, jealousy, a furious sense of ownership. Yet his evolution is the key. He didn't just claim her, he learned to follow her lead. He provided the unbreakable shield, but she wielded the subtle sword. Their victory required his power to be tempered by her quiet, and her quiet to be amplified by his strength. It became a partnership, not just a possession. The Mosswife represents the ultimate predator, one who exploits love itself as a vulnerability. She weaponized Ilara's selfless devotion, turning the purest part of her into a trap. This reminds us that our greatest strengths can be twisted into liabilities by those who know how to manipulate them. The price of love is always risk. In the end, the bog was purified not by fire, but by stillness. The catastrophe was contained not by force, but by guided release. This is the final, lasting lesson of their tale. Sometimes, the most powerful response to chaos is not a louder roar, but a deeper calm. The quiet you survive can become the tool you use to heal not just yourself, but the world around you. Ilara's story asks us a lingering question. What parts of ourselves have we been taught to see as weaknesses? Our silences, our scars, our hollow places that are, in fact, secret forges? What strength are we building right now in the quiet we don't yet understand? If you are captivated by this journey from sacrificial ghost to sovereign queen, if you believe in stories where love is a catalyst for transformation, not just possession, do us a huge favor. Tap that like button. It helps others find these deep dive narratives. Share this video with anyone who loves tales where the underdog's true power is revealed in unexpected ways. And for more explorations of the hidden psychology behind your favorite epic fantasies, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. We dissect the magic to uncover the very real human truths beating at its heart. Let us know in the comments, what did you see as Ilara's defining moment? Was it the sacrifice, the silence, or the reclamation? Until next time, remember, sometimes the universe doesn't send a storm to break you. It sends a silence to remake you.